Welcome to Green and Red, scrappy politics for scrappy people. A regular podcast on radical, environmental and anti-capitalist politics. Brought to you by Bob Bazanko and Scott Parkin.
Three, two, one, and we are
known as freedom. Come to Chicago for the
yeah.
So your brother's bound and gagged, and they've chained him to a chair. Won't you please come to Chicago just to sing? In a land that's known as freedom, how can such a thing be fair? Won't you please come to Chicago for the help that we can bring? We can take.
all right. Welcome to the silky smooth sounds of the Green and Red podcast. I am your co-host today, Scott Parkin, coming to you from Berkeley, California. And as always, I'm joined by...
In Ohio, Bob Bazanko. I'm really kind of fired up after hearing Graham Nash, ready to be kind of a little bit Siskel and Ebert, then a little bit Marx and Engels today. We are going to talk about Aaron Sorkin's new movie, which has gotten a lot of attention, well, some controversy, The Trial of Chicago 7. And we are film buffs, Scott, much more than I am. And we are historians and we are on the political left. So there's a lot of stuff in this that we have to talk about. And as always, we welcome you and thank you for your support and hope it continues and that you follow us on social media and share all the stuff that we put out so we can build up our viewership and listenership and readership and all those kinds of things.
And if you aren't already, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then also go to our YouTube channel and hit subscribe. We actually have been having a little bit of a bump in our subscriptions on our YouTube channel, and we want to continue to do that. We know that, people like Ben Shapiro have 1 million YouTube followers, and we aspire to be like Ben Shapiro in some ways, but not others. And also, if you are not a patron, go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Green Red Podcast, and become a recurring donor, or go to our website, greenandredpodcast.org, and make a one-time donation.
We are becoming a media empire. We have all kinds of videos and podcasts and actually lectures that I've been doing for my class. So you can also get a course in U.S. history for free. So
yeah, absolutely. It's the best education that YouTube can buy. And so, Bob, kind of talking about this movie, it's been in the news a little bit. There's been some criticism, and then we've also seen people on the political left, kind of commenting on some of the revisionism that comes in it, some of the historical inaccuracies. I've seen, both you and I are friends with a number of left historians who said things like, "I watched this movie so you didn't have to." And I'm just wondering, some of your initial thoughts after watching it.
Before we start, though, I want to show this off. Back in high school, I was on a rec league team, and this was our name, the Chicago 7. So, and this, I don't know why I was number 44. I don't know why I picked that. I think because of Reggie Jackson, maybe. I don't know. At any rate, my point is, this has been something that I've known about for a long time. I've studied, I've taught, and written about. There's many ways you can look at this as radicals, lefties, as historians, as teachers, and as just kind of regular people. It's full of historical inaccuracies, but I think that's kind of what we get when Hollywood goes after these things. And much more about Aaron Sorkin's work than I do, but I think that's kind of his MO, to kind of put this kind of liberal, triumphal veneer on stuff he does. So historically, it's not great. It's not archival in that regard. But I think, unlike a lot of the criticism you just mentioned, I actually thought it was pretty useful. Especially, this is a movie about 2020, and I don't know if I don't know if he did like he did more edits in the last few months or if it was already in the can when everything started in like May and June, but it's in many ways, it's a movie about 2020.
Yeah, before we were talking about like just like the sort of lens in which we watched it, and you had said that you had watched it as a person on the political left, as a teacher, as a historian, as just a regular guy. And I kind of like took that to heart and actually thought a lot about that. I would say I have at least I have a fifth lens, which is also as an organizer. And the definitely as a person on the political left, and probably wearing a little bit of my historian hat, is like I like cringed at some of the things in there. I felt like the portrayal of Tom Hayden. I was I was more than disappointed in that. I thought there should have been a little bit more critique of institutions, whereas like there's a line in it, and I don't know if this is actually from the actual transcript of the trial, but Abby Hoffman says, "I think American institutions are the greatest thing ever. They're just populated by terrible people." And thinking about Aaron Sorkin's work, and I have to admit to people out there in podcast land that I have watched every single episode of The West Wing, which is what Aaron Sorkin is most known with. And it's a long-running show about a centrist liberal president prone to make speeches so eloquent that they've reduced both Republicans and unrealistic members of the political left to silence and just acquiescence. In fact, one of the main characters, who's like a fan favorite, is actually based on Rahm Emanuel, who is, and he's portrayed as one of the good guys, and we all know that Rahm Emanuel is not. And so, like, I did feel like there was a little bit of kind of Sorkinism going on with this, where it's like the institutions are sound. It's this, they're currently populated by bad people. And I think, you talking about how it's a critique of what's going on now is like, that's the inherent message, is these institutions still work as long as they're not populated by people like John Mitchell, Richard Nixon, Donald Trump, William Barr.
Yeah, and really, I mean, I think if you look beyond that, there really is a systemic message there. I mean, it opens the very opening scene, right? It's police removing their badges and name tags, which is 2020. This is what we've been seeing. But yeah, I think there has to be. It's part of this whole kind of liberal idea that we've lost our way, right? Graham Nash was part of a band that's saying Woodstock. We've got to find our way back to the garden, right? We have to get back to the Garden of Eden. So I think there's that common thread in it. I mean, historically, like as soon as Dave Dellinger punched that guy, I cringed because Dellinger was a well-known pacifist. I actually had the great fortune at one point to spend a couple hours with him at the University of Houston. Everything's a caricature. Like Bobby Seale, actually, they went easy on that. It was much worse for Bobby Seale. He was bound and gagged for like 3-4 days, and then he was sentenced to 4 years. They didn't just let him off, So yeah, I think Sorkin doesn't, like most of these people, don't want people questioning the institutions. They want them hating on Daley and Mitchell and the prosecutor, which you should. But so historically, I don't think it's like I said, a great archival piece. There's way better stuff out there if you really want to know what's actually going on.
Yeah, I mean, they actually even make one of the prosecutors a sympathetic character. Richard Schultz, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, where even at the end, when they're reading off the names of the people who had died in Vietnam that day, he like raises his fist in solidarity, which I can't imagine a Republican federal prosecutor ever doing that in any war trial.
No, Schultz was all in on the prosecution. Do I have to say Frank Langella is a good actor? Because Hoffman, that was Hoffman was batshit, and so they kind of nailed that. In fact, during the trial, Abby Hoffman was yelling Yiddish phrases at Julius Hoffman, essentially, basically really, really nasty stuff. So they, in a sense, downplayed it, in that regard. But so, yeah, I think historically it's a movie, but, I don't want to go too far with that. I remember when Mate One came out, which is one of my favorite films ever. And then there are, John Sayles is a director, and he created some characters. You do that. I remember when a Hurricane came out, that Javert type character played by Dan Hedaya was actually a compilation of various people who were going after Hurricane Carter, and everybody, went nuts over that. It's a movie, Yeah. And so, what struck me is that a bunch of people I know on social media who are pretty much liberals, women in the suburbs right now, people like that loved it. And, I'm okay with that. I think that's a good thing, actually. So, Unlike, I think I'm probably more positive about it than most people on the left would be for that reason. I think, it shows that, in 1968, 52 years ago, the police were doing the same shit, right? Daley saying shoot to kill. Walter Cronkite said there's a police state in Chicago. I don't think anybody said that this year. So they were cracking heads, they were beating the shit out of people. So 2020 is not historically unique or aberrant.
No, not at all. And the one thing I'll say is that I do think it's important, which actually really does beg the question of like, if Sorkin had this in the can and went back and did a kind of final edit, because he definitely, the protesters are the heroes, and the reenactments of like the police storming Lincoln Park and the march on the convention and things like that is that, like, it's a which actually is contrary to actually some of Sorkin's portrayals of protesters on the West Wing, is actually pretty good. It's like it's a pretty important thing. Now, if this was happening in a Democratic administration, I'm not quite sure if Aaron Sorkin would have the same level of sympathy. But
yeah, and you notice, I mean, in 1968 it was, Lyndon Johnson's a Democrat, Richard Daley is like Mr. Democrat. It's at the Democratic convention, so that was that was definitely downplayed. I mean, the liberals were responsible for Vietnam. They were responsible for COINTEPRO. They were, willing, I mean, eager to cooperate with McCarthyism. So, yeah, that's all kind of inconvenient stuff. So, yeah, historically, I mean, if you're really into that, I would not watch this as a documentary. It's a movie. It's a Hollywood movie, and take it as it is. But I think as a teaching tool, it's actually pretty useful because the messages in it, are very clear. I mean, remember the show we did on Kent State in May? It reminded me of that too, where Rhodes was kind of channeling Daley, and I mean, Lyndon Johnson was calling the anti-war movement communist. I mean, it's very, very similar in that regard. So and I don't think, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious anybody watching it too. I think that anyone who knows anything, follows the news at all, would see that and say, oh, that's 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. And if folks are interested in some films which may be a little bit more historically accurate, I actually after watching the Netflix Aaron Sorkin film, I actually went back and watched a documentary that came out maybe in the late 2000s called The Chicago 10, which actually is made up of actual footage and then like reenactment, kind of animated reenactment footage based on the actual trial transcripts for the most part, with like actors like Hank Azaria, Nick Nolte, and Roy Scheider doing the voices, and it actually gives a little bit more of a historical. It's a little bit more. It's a documentary, so it's actually a little bit more historically accurate. But I also actually watching that film, I actually felt like that was also like that came out obviously in the Bush years after we'd had a huge anti-war movement around the war in Iraq, and I actually felt like that was also like an important teaching moment as well. And there's actually a clip I want to play from it real quick. And remember this came out in like I believe 2007, 2008, something like that. And this is going to be just like some footage from the actual David Dellinger, and then some footage from Richard P. Daley, the mayor of Chicago, and just notice some of the how the language is still relevant today.
We wish to announce now our determination to organize a rally the afternoon of August 28th, and from there to march to the International Amphitheater, where we will be heard on the fundamental issues of the war in Vietnam and racism in the United States.
This is David Dellinger, who is national chairman of the National Mobilization Committee to End the War in Vietnam. What's the purpose of your arrival here and wait at the mayor's office?
Well, obviously there's an emergency created by the city's refusal to give us any meaningful place to protest. The city invited the Democratic Convention to come in fact paid a lot of money to have it come in. In these days, with Americans and Vietnamese being killed daily in Vietnam, You can't hold a political convention without expecting some form of protest to accompany it.
I would like to say here and now,
And this is Richard P.
this
Daley, folks.
administration will never permit a lawless, violent group of terrorists to menace the lives of millions of people, destroy the purpose of this national convention, and take over the streets of Chicago.
And so, you can see the actual, some of the parallels that we still deal with. I mean, how many times did we hear Trump and other like right-wing politicians this summer call protesters like violent terrorists, right? Like they did that in Philadelphia the other night.
Yeah, I was surprised that and that Sorkin didn't use the scene from inside the convention when Senator from Connecticut, Abraham Ribicoff, who's Jewish, stood up there, and how people are always calling Trump a Nazi, said there are Gestapo tactics in the streets of Chicago. And then you cut to Daley, who's kind of got his mouth covered, but people swore he said, "Sit down, you fucking Jew." So yeah, it's 2020 is scary as hell. It's angst inducing. And like I've said many times, Trump's a different kind of cat. But the idea that we should never normalize him, I think, is a mistake, because it loses sight of the historical reality of like the Nixon campaign that year. And, we're going to talk about this in a few minutes. I think, things like COINTEPRO, just the repression of the anti-war movement and of protest in general in the 60s was every bit as intense as it is in 2020.
Yeah. And just like, kind of thinking about that, I'm like thinking about if one's worse than the other, but in some ways it's apple and oranges. In some ways it's just a continuation of that. And, we will probably actually going to enter a period at some point in the future where we have access to, Department of Homeland Security files that we're already not getting. Some of them do get leaked to the media, or some of them come out in Discovery or whatever. But like, whenever it was 10 years after Chicago 68, when the COINTEL files started coming out, we actually saw the level to which the federal government, particularly the FBI, actually, went after the New Left. They went after the Black Panthers. They went after other sort of radical movements. And, maybe we should kind of like start to talk about that a little bit right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big theme in the movie, and it's actually a theme that Sorkin kind of overemphasized. He makes these agents provocateurs and these infiltrators really kind of key themes in this. And in some cases, like the woman who Jerry Rubin allegedly fell in love with and was a Chicago cop, that's not true. It just never happened.
Yeah.
The kind of highest level of infiltration was actually one of Tom Hayden's bodyguards. But in the trial, they kind of imply there are 27, or I mean, there's a huge number of Chicago cops who testify, and you get the implication that they're all kind of infiltrators. In fact, they weren't. There were 3, I think. There weren't many. Right. And I think what this does, because we're seeing it this year, and I've talked about this before, and I catch a lot of hell from other lefties for it, is that we focus on that to the exclusion of giving protesters the I hate that word agency, but we do that, right? So like in Minnesota, it was this crazy weird guy looking like he's from the island of Dr. Moreau with an umbrella, who started all the Minneapolis uprising, who started the rebellion. And the idea, which I think is more important, which I think liberals are afraid of, is that there was a reason that 5,000 young people were in Chicago raising hell to stop a war. And I did like the fact that they kind of did, kept going back to that, especially with Abby Hoffman. This is about the war. This is about the war. Mm-hmm. The other thing, and I know a bit about Tom Hayden. I thought that it was a bit extreme on Hayden. I never heard anybody describe him that badly. And I think he and Hoffman actually got along okay. So it was weird that he set that up. But I guess that's what Sorkin does. These kind of personal things are important in Hollywood, movies.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't actually catch it in the movie, but I've read some reviews of it that basically put, quote unquote, this is loosely based on the trial, the Chicago 7. And,
yeah.
He used certain tensions like that to like emphasize, for dramatic effect, I guess you could say. And it very much pitted, Hoffman and Rubin and even Dellinger and Rennie Davis as like the sort of radicals, while Tom Hayden is still this sort of like liberal, good government, we still need to do the right thing. He's the only one who stands up when the rest of them refuse to stand up when they gag Bobby Seale. It was an interesting, I definitely felt like there was still, I say this a lot, is like during the Bush years, I felt like there was an anti-Bush movement that split when Obama came in. I think we're definitely in the midst of an anti-Trump movement that I feel like has a lot of potential to split if the Democrats win in the upcoming election. And so I feel like people like Sorkin still like to kind of play that nuance. And even in the ending credits where it talks about how Tom Hayden went on to be in the California state legislature for like 6 terms or whatever, and Abby Hoffman committed suicide. It's like also like a commentary on like where their political paths took them.
Yeah, I mean, Abby Hoffman was a hell of an activist that entire period, while he was underground.
Right.
And
our friend Lisa Fithian was mentored by him in that period.
That's what you said. That's awesome. And to go back to what you said before, I don't want to downplay the role of the FBI and COINTEPRO. It was brutal. They had infiltrated. They had intelligence. My only point is that these movements weren't. The idea that infiltrators or provocateurs kind of cause all these problems really basically is saying, well, the people in there couldn't do it on their own. And that's really. I mean, the civil rights movement was infiltrated quite a bit. Black Panthers, groups like that, but they had a legitimate reason to fight.
The one thing I don't like is that when we emphasize the role of infiltrators in particular, is that it like most activists I know, sometimes to their detriment, are actually, they're way more aware about who the provocateurs are than like Hollywood would portray it, right?
Oh yeah, I mean
I like taking away agency because Umbrella Man started the protests and the riots in Minnesota. Also, like saying that like provocateurs did this also take away like that provocateurs are able to infiltrate without being detected by people in movement spaces is also taking away agency.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at that video of the crazy guy in Minneapolis, people are telling him to stop, No, but in Houston, we were like that and we weren't doing anything wrong, but you and I would have conversations like, who's that guy? Or I've never seen him, or, hey, be careful around him. That kind
What's
of shit.
What's that car outside my house?
Yeah. I think I told you I once had HPD came up. I had my class over for the end of semester cookout, and they were taking out license plates, and it was like a scene out of The Godfather or something. It was ridiculous. So, but yeah, they're not. And let's face it, the government isn't that good at what they do. They're really, thankfully, they're really kind of the gang that couldn't shoot straight. What's the great line from The Way of the Gun? It's not exactly a brains type operation.
Yeah.
But COINTELPRO is very real. The Red Scare was very real. McCarthyism was very real. The post 9/11,
the Green Scare,
the Pink Scare, the Homeland Security. That's all real. But in the 60s, there were millions of people in the streets protesting. It wasn't just the SDS and Yippies in Chicago. That became the most high profile case. And it's one of these things how, we say like Trump is actually a favor to the left in the sense that he's kind of so vulgar and so obnoxious and so horrible that like, he flushes everybody out. I mean, Julius Hoffman kind of did that too. In some ways, you couldn't ask for a better judge because he was just so over the top. And that part's pretty real. He was insane.
Yeah. It seems like he had kind of like at that point in his career, he had lost it in the very, to be generous. It's like he's old and he just lost his shit. Yeah.
And Langella played him well. I mean, he was goofy. I don't know if like how closely they followed the transcript. One of the things that was important in my political awakening, I forget when this was made. I think it was made by BBC and then PBS picked it up. But there was actually kind of a documentary where they read from the transcripts of this trial. And I remember seeing this, a long time ago, and it really kind of, I think that's probably why I named my basketball team the Chicago 7,
Oh, you named it the Chicago 7.
Oh, yeah. It was funny. The paper would have, the scores of the intramurals, and it would say the Chicago 7 beat, whatever, 22-20 or something like that,
Right. Nice.
But, so many people have written about this. I wouldn't be as critical as most of the stuff I've seen on the left, which is some of it's been really, really, really critical. I heard an interview with Rennie Davis the other day that you sent me, and I get it. He was part of it, and Rennie Davis is really a much more important figure than Sorkin made him out to be. Davis was a big time organizer, well respected, and that whole kind of thing, like he didn't want his girlfriend's parents to know, and all that's Hollywood.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen to that interview with Rennie Davis. Rennie Davis and David Dellinger were coordinators of the National Mobilization to Stop the War, which was a huge, like the largest in U.S., at least modern U.S. history, probably in U.S. history. It was 150 national organizations, which actually, organized the Stop the War, included like Martin Luther King's, Southern Christian Leadership Conference and all that. And it's like, it was a powerful force that like mobilized all of those people. And then like that was, looking at this through the lenses of an organizer, that was one thing I felt that was a pretty big disservice is like, Rennie Davis was, I don't think he was even 30 years old. And, he and Dellinger, who, went to prison for resisting, being a pacifist and resistor in World War II, these were monumental figures, amazing people with amazing energy, with amazing skills to sort of organize this. And I felt like both of them actually, Sorkin sort of like kind of leveled a little bit of a softball hit on them. Like Davis is worried about his girlfriend's parents knowing that he's at protests. Dellinger, who's this lifelong pacifist, punches the marshal. I did have like problems with that. I actually on social media, I saw a member of Daniel Berrigan's family post about the film and about David Dellinger and how that was such a disservice to who David Dellinger was. He had Dellinger, I believe he was also like a Catholic pacifist, if I'm not mistaken. And he had a large family, and his a good portion of his family were in court every day for the 5.5 months they were on trial. And at one point, I don't know if it was over Bobby Seale or if it was over something else, like his family was like raising hell, like protesting, and the marshals were dragging him out, where one of his like 13-year-old daughter got punched by a marshal. And in the film, it's like he has like his wife and his one son who actually are somewhat questionable about whether he should be there or not. And I do find, I actually find media portrayals of organizers, with rare exceptions, especially in more mainstream films, very problematic. And it's for an establishment that loves that there was a community organizer in the White House named Barack Obama, they completely always tear down organizers in a lot of films that I watch.
Well, I mean, let's look at the way that King's historical legacy has been, played out. And I have a dream, and nonviolence and all that, and you don't even get sight of like the Poor People's Campaign or the speech against Vietnam or any of that stuff. Yeah, it fits a neat thing. I mean, these people don't want to give you successful portrayals of people who took on the system. Even Abby Hoffman, I think comes off fairly positively, but they kind of turn him into kind of a comedian or a court jester too. I mean, Hoffman had a huge following, and the stuff that Hoffman did, the stuff the hippies did, the stuff the beatniks did, was actually inherently political. And instead of doing that, you get this kind of carnival-esque approach to it. But that certainly, things like that, satire, humor, that has a role to play. Not everybody can be incredibly solemn and theoretical every moment. You need a mix of that.
Why do you want to have a bunch of serious Marxist theorists as like your political advocate when you can have Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin?
Yeah. But overall, a bunch of people I know who are not, clued in politically like geniuses and, like us, really like that. And I mean,
geniuses, quote unquote.
I'm being sarcastic. I mean, I can't tell you how many people said
we're stable geniuses, though, Bob.
We're very stable geniuses. Yeah. The doctors are amazed at what I know. But I mean, I can't tell you how many people ask me, have you seen it? Oh, it's really good. And I'm okay with that. If this lets them know that 52 years ago, the police were doing the same crap they're doing today, then that's not a bad thing. And at one point, this is clearly presentist when, was it Ramsey Clark who said the president is not a client of the attorney general? Yeah, I think it was when they went to talk to him. I mean, that's a dig at Barr, absolutely. So that had to go in later, or maybe not, but that was clearly aimed at Barr. The president is not a client of the attorney general.
I definitely felt like there's a whole sort of like subplot around how John Mitchell is like, and Nixon are wanting to undo what Clark and Johnson had done. Like in this particular subplot, it was around not prosecuting the Chicago 7 and not prosecuting the riots. And that I actually felt like that was a dig about how Trump has gone through and tried to undo everything that Obama did that he can.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe
and it being over petty, jealous rivalry kind of stuff.
Now, in Trump's case, that's true. I'm not sure Mitchell, You know, because in this, Mitchell did it because, you know, Ramsey Clark snubbed him. Whereas, you know, that was Nixon's entire campaign, law and order, you know, get America back to the old days, you know, and all that kind of thing. So
silent majority, beat up the protesters.
So going after the Seven and Bobby Seale, and I do think I've seen people take issue with the idea that they put Seale in there because the Black Panthers were unpopular. I'm not aware that Fred Hampton had that big a role in it. Maybe he did. I just wasn't aware of that. But yeah, they personalized it, right? I mean, in Trump's case, yeah, there's clearly absolutely an element of that. But in this, I think there were these bigger political issues that Nixon had run as this law and order candidate who wanted to crack down, who wanted to send a message. And so, you know, and Sorkin turned it into a kind of a personal feud between John Mitchell and Ramsey Clark.
Yeah. And I you know, actually thinking about the you mentioned the Fred Hampton thing, which like a part of the film is that like Fred Hampton is like a sort of behind the scenes figure actually in Bobby Seale's defense, and then the assassination of Fred Hampton by the Chicago police and the FBI actually happened while they're on trial, and you know, to me, Fred Hampton is like an important figure in organizing in the late '60s as well, and I have to say I did like the fact that they brought Fred Hampton into the into the story. I thought that was important. I don't know. I'm like you. I don't know if there was actually he was that involved, but I actually do feel like that was an important thing to bring into the story. There's actually a new film. There's a new film out about Fred Hampton too that maybe we could review at some point. But I did think that was important. And if I'm not mistaken, kind of talking about COINTEPRO in this period, is that like when the Nixon administration ranked some of the activist groups it was most afraid of, Black Panthers was number 1, Vietnam Vets Against the War was number 2, right? Yeah. No, I mean, the COINTEPRO was a very real thing. I thought it was great to make Hampton like kind of a central figure in that. You know, you were talking earlier about organizing, and I remember, you can speak to this way better than I can as an organizer, but when I saw the Harvey Milk movie, I think it was just called Milk with Sean Penn. That's a good portrayal of an organizer. Well, that's what I was going to say. As I watched that, I thought this is a really good movie about organizing. Whereas I'm not sure this one is really at all, you know, but it's going for the melodrama. But, you know, if I took one thing away from it, it's that it really got this message out, you know, to people who may not be, you know, bought in as much as people like you and I are who've been following this forever, that the police, you know, policemen are bad, you know, they can be sociopathic, violent thugs, you know, and that's not new. That's kind of who they are. Yeah. And I actually, you know, Aaron Sorkin definitely tries to make it like institutions and systems are actually, you know, can work and are inherently good. And it's just populated by terrible people. I actually, you know, well, in my heart of hearts, I do believe that, you know, the police state and policing is like an inherently horrible institution. Everything from, you know, school security guards to prison systems, right? And I did think, for someone who tries to stay away from the anti-system stuff, I did feel like it still came out that there's like a systemic problem with policing in this film. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think if you look at that, you're not seeing just a few bad apples, you know, they're kind of all in. I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like that's despite Aaron Sorkin's best efforts to make institutions good. Well, it's kind of hard to do that with, but yeah, no, I mean, I think we could also just be jaded radicals too. So yeah, no, I mean, I think, you know, the people I know aren't looking at that and saying, oh, there's just a few bad apples. You know, they're like, this is the Chicago police. They're all in. They're kind of enjoying it. I mean, you know, the other night in Philly, they stopped the people who went the wrong way down the street. You know, pulled them out, beat the shit out of them, took their baby, and then put out a fucking tweet that says, look, we found this baby in the street, you know, and running around barefoot. And we pretend we saved it, and the Philadelphia Inquirer called them out, so they had to take it down. But no, they're sociopathic. There's no doubt. And there's also now video of the police smashing out the windows of their own vehicles and saying it was protesters that did it. Oh yeah, they've done that in every major city. You know, that's the thing too. I was going to say they're not that dumb, but you know, they got to know they're being recorded by 1,000 people and don't care. Yeah. And in Chicago, they did have that anonymity. I mean, there were TV cameras there and stuff, but it was
very different. But like I said, I thought the very opening, as soon as it starts with the policeman taking off his badge and his name tag, I'm thinking like, all right, he went back and added this scene, in the last couple months. Yeah. Because it's just so present us that, I don't look at movies as documentaries. I don't look at those as historical documents. So like Hurricane is one of my favorite movies ever. And I know that, who was it? Sidney Lumet did that, I think. He's a director. That's what they do. It has to fit in within 2 hours. And, Spike Lee got some grief from Malcolm X movie and John Sayles from 8-1. I don't care. Born on the 4th of July, I thought was a good movie, even though some of that stuff never happened. Yep. So, they're not historians.
I'll say for folks who also want to learn more about this, the film, The Chicago 10, the documentary is good. And then a film, which is also like a sort of Hollywood version, but I actually feel like had a little bit more radical substance and definitely kind of talk about institutions, which is about this period and these people, which is called Steal This Movie, with Vincent D'Onofrio as Abby Hoffman and Jean Garofalo. It's a biofilm of Abby Hoffman, and it's also Hollywoodized, but it's also very good.
Yeah. I think I told you, Kelsey, my late son watched that thing like dozens of times. He loved it. It's well done. And, Abby is a great figure. And Steal This Book. Who was the book about Abby Hoffman? I can't remember now. Somebody wrote a pretty cool book about Abby Hoffman. I can't remember what it's titled. I think John Wiener wrote a book about the Chicago trial, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, there's a ton of stuff out there. But especially it's on Netflix, you don't have to pay for it. So I would definitely say, watch it. Absolutely. I would encourage you to watch it. And, if you're looking for historical, accuracy, yeah, it's going to fudge a lot of stuff, but I think the message is fairly clear. And sometimes I remember during Mate One, a lot of my lefty friends, labor historians especially, it's too didactic. It's like, that's what movies are supposed to do. Like the left never understood that idea. If you create your own reality, you're just very, you have to be very assertive. And I mean, that's the only thing Trump knows how to do, right? Is just lie and double down on it.
Abby Hoffman understood that, I would say too.
Yeah, he did. He did. Absolutely. So no, I would definitely, I would give it a thumbs up, in that regard.
I'll give it a 75% thumbs up.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, because actually, also I'm a big fan of everyone who makes an effort to kind of bring this stuff to people's attention. So
yeah.
Folks, you have been listening to the Green and Red podcast talk about Aaron Sorkin's The Trial of the Chicago 7. If you are a fan of the Green and Red podcast but don't follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, pull out your phone and do it right now. If you are not a subscriber to our YouTube channel, go to Green and Red Podcast on YouTube and subscribe right now. And if you're not a patron, go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Green Red Podcast, and become a patron. And then if you like us and want to give us money and don't want to give it to any more Democratic Senate candidates as the election is almost over, then please go to greenandredpodcast.org and hit our donate button and make a sizable, charitable, generous donation to Green and Red Podcast. We do this on a shoestring. We get grants from really generous friends and activist groups, and sometimes even out of our own pockets. And we just need to keep going. And that is going to be today's show. And you'll be seeing this really soon. And I hope everybody has a pleasant election week. Talk to you later.